This is Wendy Halley, and you're listening to Lucid Cafe. Hey, thanks for tuning in. It's the holiday season, and if you're looking for a unique otherworldly gift, I hope you'll check out the Lucid Path Boutique on Etsy. I'm such a fan of Etsy because it allows creators of pretty much any kind of art to sell their wares. I started selling shamanic frame drums with hand-painted henna designs on Etsy some years ago, and I recently expanded the offerings to include power animal and other trippy cosmic t-shirt designs. I can get lost for hours making these designs. It's really fun. Right now, through December 12th, 2021, I'm offering free shipping and 20% off all t-shirts and notebooks. A link to the Lucid Path Etsy shop is in the show notes, or you can just do a search for Lucid Path on Etsy. I had a really fun conversation with today's guest, Tina Zion. She's a fourth-generation intuitive medium, educator, and is considered an expert in medical intuition. She's an award-winning author specializing in medical intuition and teaches internationally. Tina has worked in the mental health field as a registered nurse. She is a Gestalt-trained mental health counselor, graduating from the Indianapolis Gestalt Institute in 1997. She received her certification in clinical hypnotherapy from the American Council of Hypnotist Examiners and specialized in past life regressions. Tina was also certified through the Michael Newton Institute, which I didn't realize when I originally sat down and chatted with her. I'll have to see if she'd be willing to come on the show again and talk about her regression work. She received her first Reiki attunement from Diane Stein and went on to receive the master teacher degree. She taught Reiki for over 10 years. As an internationally known author, Tina's 2 medical intuition books both won first place gold awards, and her 4 books are selling in over 40 countries. She's the author of Become a Medical Intuitive, Advanced Medical Intuition, The Reiki Teacher's Manual, Reiki and Your Intuition, and is the contributing author in Michael Newton's book, Memories of the Afterlife. Tina now focuses on teaching medical intuition all around the globe. Please enjoy my conversation with Tina Zion. Tina, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, bless your heart. Thank you for having me. I so appreciate it. I really do.
Yeah, so you have a new book out.
Yes.
Be Your Own Medical Intuitive, Healing Your Body and Soul.
Yes.
So I was very interested to talk to you because I wanted to talk to somebody about intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can throw healing into the mix, that's even better.
Yes.
What I enjoy about your book is that it's really focused on self-healing, using these techniques that you provide in the book to work on yourself.
Absolutely. Yes.
Before we dive into what your book is about, how did you find yourself on the path of becoming an intuitive or a medical intuitive?
Well, I grew up in a family that expected the kids to be intuitive. It was the most natural thing for us to say, oh, my deceased grandma was here. Grandma Marie was here. And everybody would say, well, what did she say? Did she have her leopard skin boots on and things like that? It was just serious, the most natural. And my father's father and his brother were very active in the spirituals church. My mother's side, from my great-grandmother on down, who I spent a lot of time with my great-grandmother, she was an active medium and did card readings too for people. So now what I would want everyone of your listeners to hear is we did not have any special gift. I don't have a special gift, or I couldn't run all over the world teaching people how to do this, really. But I did have an environment that it was natural, it was expected, it was trusted. So that made all the difference.
You know how rare that is, right?
Well, I do now. Back then,
You didn't know, yeah.
No, I just thought everybody talked about these things and was aware of the non-physical world. I just thought everybody did. But I found out quickly
Mm.
that was not true.
Imagine if everyone had that kind of openness in
Yeah,
their
I know. I know.
in their families.
Yes, yes. Because I truly feel like I live with one foot in the physical and one foot in the non physical at the exact same time because we are truly wired very naturally to be intuitive. Most people call it their gut sense or their instincts. So it's very, very natural.
And that's what I wanted to ask you is what is your definition of intuition?
Intuition is really, in my opinion, the ability to notice information that's everywhere around us. So it comes through physical things like a word on a truck that drives through the intersection. It comes through our guides who just pop information to us. It comes constantly because we're constantly, you and I right now, and everybody listening are sitting in waves of information, really. So intuition is simply noticing the very, very subtle and the not so subtle too as information.
I love that. That's a word that I end up using a lot. I have a long time shamanic practice, and so when I am working on behalf of others, I'm seeing symbols, right? A narrative playing out in the dream time, and I describe it as information. It's just information, and
Truly.
these symbols have stories to tell us. I think it can lower the fear a bit because some people are concerned about, well, what if you see something that's really disturbing or really upsetting or
Yes.
well, it's just information.
And I do my best in my books and in my workshops to take the fear away from the non-physical because we are spirit beings right now. We just happen to be inside a physical body, but and we're surrounded with spirit beings in the non-physical world. So we're really already a part of the non-physical world. We're not separate unless we think we are.
That's a cool way to put it.
I just inform them that our aliveness is truly the spirit within us. We are already an entity, an energetic entity inside of our physical body. Some people are lugging around a physical body and some people are not.
How do you describe for folks when they say, well, I saw something very disturbing or I perceived something that scared me?
One of the things I would say is if something scared you, notice really what was scary about it. Because just because we are a spirit being doesn't mean we're scary. If anything, if a spirit person comes to us, they either want something or they need something. And then if you perceive something that is not human or something like that, then, sometimes they're ugly. And we just need to realize that ugly does not mean powerful. It just means ugly. It,
Okay.
it does not mean it's more powerful.
Gotcha. All right. So I want to go back a little bit to
Yeah.
your journey because I suspect you've been doing intuitive work for a long time. Yeah.
Yes. It's incorporated in what I do. Yes.
In your family, did everyone end up pursuing that as a career, doing intuitive type work, or was it more just a part of life and it informed whatever career path they took?
I'm truly the only one who's taken it into a professional level. Although, like I said, my father's mother and father, and which would be my grandparents and my uncle, were very involved in the spiritualist church. So they gave readings and things like that. But no one really did it professionally. So it's just very, very natural. And my nieces, here's a good example. I think my niece moved into a very, very ancient farmhouse, and she called me and she said, "Aunt Tina, there's some people in this house that are not happy that I'm here. Would you check into this?" And I said, "Sure, let's do something about it. See what their spirit people's wants and needs are, what they're thinking, and how they're struggling." And off we went.
Did you decide as a teenager, this is my path, this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to be a professional intuitive? Or did you find your way to that path another way?
I wish I could say that was that easy, but no, I got caught up in being married and having kids and all that stuff. And it was quite minimal in my life at that time. And I am a registered nurse and specialized certification in psychiatric nursing. Then I went on for mental health counseling, studied in the Gestalt manner of doing counseling. And then I was found myself doing Reiki. I found myself teaching Reiki, teaching meditation. So I always find myself teaching something somewhere. And the medical part of it actually didn't begin until about 1991. And I was giving a lot of Reiki for people. It's a hands-on energy exchange, really. And I suddenly realized I was zooming around inside of this person's body. And what's going on? Where am I? And I was inside this person's colon. And so I'm zooming through the colon and then took a sharp, turn to the left and zoomed around. And there was a group of very black polyps. And then the next person, I was suddenly looking into her lungs and saw the inflammation of her lungs from smoking and things like that. So the medical part started very spontaneous. And people were asking me, well, so I started doing sessions for that without the Reiki. I just started doing sessions and including it in counseling with my counseling clients. And people were saying, how is it that you're so accurate? I'm telling you, for years, I went, I don't know. It just comes in, beats me. I don't know. It just pops in. And then I was hearing that so much, I thought, well, how am I doing that? And so I studied myself for about, I think, 9 or 10 months. And that's what led to my first medical intuition book, which has become a medical intuitive. And it's really because people have asked me how I'm doing it. And I really hadn't any idea. It just kind of I was doing it. But then when I realized I was studying myself and I was taking notes, for months and months, oh, this time with this person, this and that happened. And so I really just logged down what was happening. And so that led to my books and led to the workshop. So I wish I could say, boy, it just took off from my teenage years, but no, it didn't at all.
Okay, so your first book definitely sounds like you just naturally slip into the role of teacher.
I love to do it. So I find myself just teaching meditation or teaching something over the years.
I love that you were observing your practice of taking these journeys inside of people's bodies. What was the most marked thing about that experience that stood out to you?
How it began spontaneously, it just started happening while I was doing Reiki. And so, I was teaching Reiki too, and I realized the energy level, the particular frequency of energy tends to open people's intuition up. Well, I was already perceiving deceased people. I was already talking to dead people since I was a little tiny kid. But the medical intuitive part, I love that because I'm a registered nurse too. And so I love that part of it. And that's really how that developed. And the thing I like about it is I love bringing together the awareness of science along with the non-physical world. So I love the, teachings of ions and the Institute of Noetic Sciences, the Heart Math Institute, and some people like Gary Schwartz, Harvard trained scientist, who's doing his best to research that he's confident that our consciousness moves on after death. And so he's doing his best and the scientists to document that. And so I love it when I always say when the ooh wah wah comes together with science, I like that.
The ooh wah wah.
The ooh wah wah. That's what I call it. The ooh wah wah.
I've heard people say woo woo.
Oh, yeah. I am too. Some reason I'd say ooh wah wah. So
I love it. Yeah. Do you feel like people have to have knowledge of anatomy in order to really be able to do this well?
you tend to need to know, I always say, where the major body parts are at, which side of your abdomen is the liver on, and your spleen and your gallbladder and things like that. And so in my books, I always make the most simple anatomy chart where it says liver and then there's a line over into the area where the liver really is, because you should really know at least those systems, those organs. Because if you perceive, like with the liver, if you perceive a real muddy looking maroon red, then that would give you the information that this person has been holding on to anger for a long, long time. Especially old anger tends to go to the liver. New kind of current anger tends to go to the bronchial tubes. So it is good, but it's not necessary because I would say 50% of the people that come to my workshops don't have any medical background. And the other thing I would like to add is more and more physicians, nurses, nurse practitioners, physical therapists are coming to my courses because they say, I just know stuff about my patient before I walk in the room. I just know things before I open up the chart. And what am I doing? How am I doing that?
Going to your workshop is like a big validation, I imagine, huh?
Well, yes, because they want to know how they're doing it and how can they do it more? How can they really, what I would say, escalate that ability? So they're already recognizing, see, the medical world's truly recognizing intuition more and more, at least in my experience.
That does sound very promising.
I said, I know.
I
I know.
haven't encountered that a lot, but I'm hoping it's spreading a little bit more
Yeah,
because the more tools at someone's disposal when they're working with your health, I think the better.
I think so too.
How have you handled it when you've perceived something potentially devastating to someone's health?
Hmm. I tend to say the hard things out loud, but we need to be, before you give it a diagnosis, I teach in other countries too, and it's pretty much the same in other countries. If you're not licensed to diagnose, you should not have a diagnosis come out of your mouth. But what we intuitives can do is we can describe in detail, along with the location of whatever we perceive. So to answer your question, I will say to a person, I need to tell you about some things that might be hard for you to hear. Now, is that okay? Should I move forward? Should I say it? And they'll go, okay, all right. And so you kind of I give them a heads up. I change the tone of my voice into a more gentle place. And I say the hard things out loud. I wouldn't ever say cancer or bleeding ulcer or things like that, but I would say negativity, because that would be some negative things. I would say, like a bleeding ulcer, I would say, oh, the lining of your stomach is really red and on fire, and there's a raw looking place in there. So I guess kind of a long answer to your question is I really think it's our place, especially as medical intuitives, to really not skirt around what's troubling people because that's why they've come to us.
Do you end up recommending that they maybe go see a doctor?
Oh, yes. Thank you for asking that because I truly see this as integrative medicine. It's, the ooh, wah, wah and medicine coming together. That, yes, from my office, I have sent people to the emergency room. I have just demanded that someone call their physician and get a colonoscopy, schedule things like that. Yes, frequently. Someone who I'm picking up is suicidal and they agree. I'll have them call a family member right then and there in the session.
You mean the person you're reading for is
Yeah.
suicidal?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right,
Yeah. Yeah.
gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. And at this point, I'm teaching so much that I'm not doing direct readings anymore, but I do private mentoring sessions to help people realize they have this ability for themselves. And that's what led to the new book, too, that people can do this for themselves also.
Yes, exactly. And so how challenging do you think it is to teach someone how to be their own medical intuitive?
It is challenging because, and I'm just noticing this about myself, is it seems so completely normal to me that I will say things just thinking it makes common sense because it's common sense to me when it's so maybe new to other people that they can't quite grasp it in the way that I'm saying. So that's why I offered the workshops. I have a recorded workshop. This is why I do mentoring sessions to help people continue on with this ability to keep building it, really, because this stuff is very, very new to many, many people.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering because it can be quite foreign
Very,
to some.
very.
I'm sure you get the whole spectrum of levels of experience.
Yes. Even people that are very professional. I've had some very famous, well known mediums and intuitives in my courses because they want to pick up the medical part of this. I used to get really nervous about that. They've been the kindest people to me about things that they picked up and,
What were you nervous about?
well, because they're so well known, because they have great reputations and things like that.
So you felt a lot of pressure or something?
Well, I just felt nervous that I was going to say the same old thing to them and they wouldn't learn anything, but they are still kind to me. And they always come up and they say, oh my goodness, this and this and this made all the difference in the world for me. And oh, okay, in our practice session, I picked up some medical information and stuff like that. But I used to get very nervous.
Yeah, I could see that. That would make perfect sense.
Yeah.
And every intuitive has their own perspective, right? And so I
Mhm.
imagine that you sharing yours with other folks, even really seasoned folks, that they might pick up something or understand something in a way that they never understood it before, just because your experience is a completely different experience.
Yes, yes, yeah, I've noticed that as well. And they'll say, well, you said it in such a different way than what I've thought of before, or things like that. So I hear that frequently.
When you're teaching people who have zero experience, how do you typically get them going? Do you do certain types of exercises?
What I've found is, especially if people are new at this, they're still getting intuitive information, or they wouldn't even be thinking about becoming an intuitive, let alone a medical intuitive. So I bring that to their attention that they are already getting signals from the universe that they are to pay more attention to their intuition. Now, this is an interesting thing. I don't usually bring it up when talking like this, but when people are new at this, they tend to work really hard at being intuitive. And so they almost always, their third eye, there in their forehead, tends to push outward. You're nodding too, tends to push outward like a unicorn. It kind of looks like a unicorn. And I'll know, oh, it's becoming so important to them. They're working hard because they're trying to find it. They're trying to find where's the information, where's the intuition, and things like that. And so one of the first steps is that the clearest intuitives, they don't work at all. They don't work hard at all and they don't work at all because it's more like you and I are antennas. The clear intuitives are more like an antenna. And an antenna doesn't run up and down the street trying to find the signals. It just sits there and receives. So I teach people about training their forehead, their third eye, to be an intake center is really one of the first steps. Now that you ask me that, it's one of the first steps is to teach them to stop working at all. It's about receiving.
Do you think that has anything to do with trying to think their intuition into being?
Oh, yes. Don't you think? Yes, absolutely.
I know I'm guilty of this too early in my practice. It's like being in your head. You can't really perceive with your thoughts. Your thoughts are going to kick in later, right? To interpret, to put words to what you perceive.
Put
But
words to it. Yes.
we Westerners are so head centric. We're so
Good word for it. Yes. Yes.
so
Good word
top
for
heavy.
it. Yes. Yeah. Pretty much life is right here. And I said, well, we're more
Hmm.
than just a head floating around. We have a whole body here.
Yep, a lot more there. Yeah,
A lot
exactly.
more. A lot
Including
more.
possibly a unicorn horn. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want a unicorn head. No. But that does make a difference. But then you have to point out to people how they just worked hard when we're practicing and that kind of thing. Because people don't realize, oh, I'm thinking really hard trying to find it. They don't think that that is even working hard. So then that'd be the next step is to, in a mentoring session, okay, now that was you working hard, where we're putting it into action.
That's a very gentle, sweet way to say that. Get out of your fucking head. Yes.
Something like that, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure you don't say it like that exactly.
Yep, I knew what.
Uh-huh. So then how do you get folks to be out of their heads?
Hmm. Pretty much a lot of little practice sessions, but especially pointing out how it is they're working. Because people don't realize that when they're trying hard, they don't even realize they're trying hard to get a piece of information that's intuition. So it's really just pointing out, just letting them talk, listening to the words, listening to how they describe struggling to be more intuitive. And then you can hear all the work that they're doing and how they're working too hard. So I really keep going back to that and then pointing out now, this is the difference. You just receive without any effort. You just receive. You have to put out clear requests, but then it's a matter of, I always say pause and take the pop. Well, that's another thing I could bring up is I talk to people about the difference between their intellectual thinking mind and perceiving the instant that pops in. And you said symbols a while ago. I think symbols are very efficient. It's spirit being very efficient because a symbol gives a whole story really quickly. So it's a very efficient way to receive intuitive information. That's for sure. So I just point things out to them.
What are the different ways to perceive? So we talked about perceiving a symbol in your mind's eye. What
Mhm.
are some other ways to perceive?
What I'd say even more about symbols first is to notice if the symbol appears in a certain location around your client or around yourself, if you're doing this for yourself. So that's really, really important. That thought is a primary pathway to receive information. And they'll say, yeah, but how do I figure that out? I'm thinking constantly. Well, it's truly is the pop, that feeling that pops out of nowhere. And then the few seconds after that, then your thinking mind kicks in trying to make sense of it. So I tell people to always take the pop when it just pops in out of nowhere. And it'll pop in as thought, and that's telepathy. That really is the ability to be telepathic, the thought bouncing back and forth. Also, the sensations in our body, smell and taste. Like, oh, if somebody is diabetic and they have it under control, lots of times I don't pick it up at all. But if their blood sugar is too high, this is just an example. I'll get like a sticky, sweet texture and flavor in my mouth. Yeah, see, some of it seems kind of common sense to me. But see, so that taste and smell, I've smelled chemotherapy, and the person says, "Oh, that was 10 years ago." And I said, "Well, you're thinking about it a lot, though, are you? Because I'm picking it up in your energy field. How it smells to me is like if our car overheats, that hot metallic smell.
Kind of chemical.
Chemical. Yeah, that's a
Hmm.
good word for it. Yeah, so it's things like that. So we have all these different pathways, and it's about noticing these different pathways. Hearing to me is like people hearing our voices right now touching their eardrums. That's different to me than telepathy because that's thought energy bouncing back and forth rather than actual verbal. But I was telling somebody the other day, we get it verbally too because I heard Tina in the middle of the night just a couple weeks ago, and I sat up and I said, "What?" You
Of course.
know, so, somebody's yelling at me in the middle of the
Yeah, got to
night.
answer. I guess that's called clairaudience, right?
Yes,
Would you describe that as it's as if someone is talking to you?
th-
It sounds like it, but there's no one there.
exactly. Yes, that's clairaudient, and I think that's actually a bit unusual. Like me hearing my name be yelled at me in the middle of the night is a bit unusual, even for me. And people get that mixed up with thought, with telepathy, which telepathy is thought energy that we're receiving from a deceased person to us, from us to a deceased person, for example. And that is more common, but I know so many psychics and mediums over the years, and they all call it hearing. But if we talk about it, that it's really hearing is like we hear it touching our eardrum, but really it's mostly telepathy.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would imagine that clairaudience is rare.
It is for me. Yeah, it is.
I don't hear much about people saying that they're hearing actual voices unless you're having a psychotic break. But do you think when you
Mm.
have the knowing, all of a sudden there's just a bunch of information
No.
in
Yes.
your noggin and you don't know how it got there? It's a
Yeah.
certainty. How would you describe that? Is that a telepathy type of an experience or
I think that knowing it to me is the hardest thing to explain because to me, it's kind of like a wave of information. I don't know how else to say it. It just kind of, it's just a wave of a whole groupie or piece of information.
okay, so it is different then. You would
Oh,
describe it as
yes.
something different.
Yep. I do.
I think for anyone going down this path, one of the most challenging aspects of developing this practice is learning to discern the difference between true intuitive guidance and wishful thinking.
Yes.
So, how do you work with folks in discerning those two different ways of perceiving?
People really struggle with that. And again, I had to figure this out really by studying myself that led to the books that I realized here's the key thing that I realized is that intuition will be neutral information. It will be neutral where if there's any emotion involved in it, it's not the clearest intuition because it's possibly us thinking, feeling. But true intuition is very neutral. It's just information. It's just like reading a history book. We're reading about maybe terrible things, but it feels kind of neutral because we're detached from it. So the things that just leap in again out of nowhere, we're very detached from that.
Yeah, I
There's
think neutral's a great word to
is that
describe it.
good?
And then in instance, you can have an emotional reaction to it.
Yes, which would be normal. Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Boy, see, I just point these kind of things out. The split second it comes in out of nowhere, it's just information. It's just facts. It's as simple as for some reason it popped in that morning to take a different road than you ever take to work. And it just leaped in out of nowhere. And so you do it and find out that there was a big terrible wreck or something. So it's really that. It's just information. Take a different road. Okay.
I suspect that each one of us has at least one experience like that in our lives that kind of gets our attention.
I would think so because the information is it's constant. And it's, yeah, it's simply a matter of noticing it. I, I tell people, I really just teach people how to notice the very subtle.
Like they're tuning their focus to a different frequency, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. I
Yeah.
like that.
When you're doing medical intuition work, what do you notice around the relationship between physical ailments and emotionality?
It might be hard for your listeners to hear this, but I've been doing this since 1991, so a really, really long time now, decades. And I have found that emotion is under everything. Maybe not under, but within everything that is our body struggling in some way, if not ill. Like anytime that we have aches and pains, there's emotional pain down inside of that. And it might be hard to find the source of it, but it's there. It's like I said about the liver a little while ago. I've noticed over the years that old unresolved anger tends to go to our liver, and then our liver gets more and more ill. Current arguing, current anger tends to go to our bronchial tubes, going to our lungs. Sorrow and sadness always goes to our lungs.
Do you find that's consistent with all
I
of the
do.
clients you've seen over the years? Yeah.
I do.
Because there does seem to be a relationship between East Asian medicine and what you're describing, like the liver and anger and the lungs and
Yes.
grief and sadness.
Yes. So again, when I studied myself, I was also studying the client and keeping their their names always very confidential, but I would just write down, gosh, this person agreed with me that she was holding on to old crap in life and is terribly chronically constipated. So even our language, that's what I like to talk about too. We have phrases in our language. Oh, it just feels like he stabbed me in the back. Well, there will be a weakened area in people's energy field because they literally that comment that they made was very painful and hurting, and it bam weakened us. So yeah, this body mind emotion connection is very real.
In your book, you talk about healing these things. So once you identify them, you perceive them within yourself, then the next step is to heal them.
Yes.
So what do you, not to, we're certainly not going to ask you to review your entire book or anything, but in,
That's okay. I don't mind talking about this. I love it, in fact.
in general, what's your take on how someone would heal themselves?
A primary thing that we haven't talked about yet is we must, as spirit entities in a physical body, we must truly make sure that we know who we are using for guides. Where is the information coming from? And again, when I say to myself, I realized that I was insisting that I would only work with the divine and sacred level. Any words that would rule out negativity. So divine, sacred, maybe pure, holy. Some people love the word holy, but at least divine and sacred. And so the more careful I got about who in the heck I'm communicating with and who is assisting me in these ways, I give them a little interview too. When I have a new guide arrive, they're specialists. So I'm asking for a divine and sacred specialist in whatever the need is at that time. So I don't know if that kind of goes off or if that's what you were wondering about. I teach a lot about being very clear with what we're asking because telepathy is just simply energy in word form. Every thought we think is an electrical spurt going out. There's a lot of research in science too about the power of our thoughts. So I would beg people to take care. Don't just call out to the universe for help because you could get some old dead guy floating by who doesn't know who doesn't know anything, and then you got an old dead guy hanging around.
Used to be a gas station attendant, and now he's going to
Not
help you heal your
exactly.
liver because you're angry. Yes.
Exactly. And he hasn't been always tired, right? He's just hanging out, goofing around.
So the important thing you're saying is, which I 100% agree with, is the idea that you have to be in relationship with spiritual allies.
Very high level ones.
Okay.
Yes.
That was the other thing I loved about what you were saying in your book too, is the relationship part, is that it is a relationship, right?
I develop, and I beg people to develop a relationship, interactive. And a lot of people think they can only do this if they meditate for 30 minutes and then toward the end of 30 minutes they can start talking to their guides. When I say I hope that they just incorporate this when they're standing in a grocery store line. I'm talking to my guides. I'm working things out just with telepathy back and forth. I literally truly have a foot in one world and a foot in the other, the physical and the non-physical, exact same time.
And in light of that, are you suggesting that your spiritual helpers, allies, are the ones who are actually doing the healing work, or are you participating in it as well?
I'm participating in the shamanic way. I used to live and work on the Navajo reservation, so I've worked with Navajo and Hopi and Southern Ute, and they would say, become the hollow bone. Truly, we're just a pipe. If we're really getting out of the way, that we're simply a pipeline or a bridge from the non-physical to the physical world to a client that we're helping, something like that. So yes,
Yeah, a lot of what you're describing is very shamanic.
very shamanic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to sort of drive home for anyone who might be listening, that one person who's listening. I'm just kidding.
What a Lord, yeah.
Is that you don't have to know how to heal. You just have to know how to ask.
Yes, to ask clearly because every word is an electrical spur. So we have to be clear with what we're asking for. But I did find over as I've studied stuff that I kept ending up with 8 categories of cause of illness. And one of them is our thoughts and emotions. Another is our past lives and our ancestors. So I found like 8 groupings of cause of illness. And then my guides would lead me to the steps to do with a client. And so that's really what I teach, and everybody tells me that's different because it's not only just receiving information to tell a client. I talk to people about taking every single time into a healing of some sort, some level.
What do you mean by that? Taking every single time? Oh, you mean previous lifetimes?
Well, past lifetimes are one of the causes making us ill or having not just physically ill, but having, I would say, like a life struggle, a repetitive negative pattern in our life, things like that. So it's not always physical, but it's also mental, emotional health, but also life experiences. A lot of times when life keeps repeating, like we find the same very abusive type of boyfriend, that would be a usual example. Well, that's a signal from the universe. So wait a minute, you need to learn from this and do something from it. So that's what I mean, that every single, we'll call it readings, because that's what most people call when they're an intuitive for another person or an intuitive for themselves. They're like doing a reading, and to take it to a healing every time. So I have all kinds of different healing methods that my guides have given me based on different methods for each cause of illness. So there's bunches of different healing ways that my guides have given me over the years. In writing, I tried to get the steps in writing, which is kind of hard, but
And you have shared them in your
yeah,
book.
yes,
So folks who want to do this for themselves can pick up a copy of your book
yeah,
and learn the details of all of those different techniques. So I guess the conclusion is that it's complicated. There's that healing, there's lots of different possible sources for why an ailment might show up.
yes.
And so the trick is to learn how to discern what the source is and then be able to go and ask for healing for that
Yes.
particular
Mm.
source.
And I even work with my divine and sacreds to ask what is the source of this before the healing even starts. Where the heck does this begin?
Yeah, it's a good question to ask.
Yeah, like if we've got a big pain in our physical body, well, what's underneath that? When did that start? That particular pain.
And I think part of the trickiness of this practice is that you may have an idea of what you think it is, and then that can prevent you from perceiving the true source. If you have it wrong or it's
Yeah,
partially right, you may miss the true source because you're getting in your own way. So I guess what you're saying is it's so important to ask the right questions.
the right questions and then pause and take the pop out of nowhere because then we're not involved in our own emotion about something. Yes, but you said it beautifully, and that was beautiful. That's
Oh, golly,
exactly right.
thanks. So what if someone perceives something that makes absolutely no sense to them whatsoever? You get that pop and it's like, huh?
Yeah, well, that'll happen. Yeah, that'll happen a lot. Well, what I would say to that is, what exactly did you not get about the pot? And then form a very precise question, short and to the point, to your divine and sacreds. And then pause. You ask a question, pause, and take the pot. Because, most people in prayer and stuff, we're always chatting away to either our angels, our guides, or God, or source, or universe. And what I say is, we've got to pause and let them respond. Even if we're saying something to a deceased person, most of the time, living people just keep talking and they'll say, well, my deceased person doesn't answer. I said, well, have you given them time? And every time,
That's a polite way of saying you need to shut up.
we'll say, "You're right. You're right. I just keep talking." We'll pause and let a deceased person clear up to God answering you.
Yeah, I guess that's a good reminder that we could all use some quiet time.
Well, I think really that's kind of underneath meditation because I've taught that for years. Is it's pausing, it's a listening.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a listening.
Are you actively teaching workshops now?
Yeah, I just do mentoring sessions, individual private mentoring to help people build their own intuitive skills for intuition and medical intuition. And then I teach workshops. And before COVID, I was going all over the world teaching workshops. Now they're all on Zoom live on
Okay, so if somebody wanted to find out about you and your
Zoom.
workshops and your mentoring program, how would they go about doing that?
It's just my website. And it's very simple. It's just tinazion.com. And all those different things are on my site to explain about it. My teaching schedule, which for this year, I just finished the last one just this last weekend for this year. But yeah, starting to schedule more for next year again.
All right, and I'll include a link to your
Thank
website
you.
in the show notes
Ah,
as
thank
well.
you.
Tina, this has been a fun conversation.
Listen, I have enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Wendy.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And I hope everyone buys your book.
I hope so too. Thank you.
She's fun. I think developing your intuition is a worthwhile pursuit. It takes a little discipline, but if you stick to it, life will probably start making a lot more sense. If you'd like to learn more about Tina's workshops, mentorship program, and books, please visit her website, tinazion.com. Thank you for listening and for supporting the podcast in whatever way you can, like giving a positive review, letting others know about the show, making a donation, or by checking out the new offerings at the Lucid Path Etsy shop. Until next time.